indicators: presence or talk of an overly controlling boyfriend, injuries, signs of physical abuse, few or no personal possessions, inconsistencies in the story is pretty popular, an excessive amount of sexual partners. Their demeanor, I feel like once you work with kids that have been trafficked, for me, aside from the physical indicators of like branding or things like that, the demeanor is always the biggest indicator for me, because you learn that the demeanor of someone who's been trafficked is very different from any other like kind of demeanor that I've seen in a kid, in that the level of fear and anxiety, and just like almost like if they hear a noise, like they're jumpy, like they're just on edge all the time. And if you think about it, it's because they need it to be, because at any minute the pimp could say, do this, don't do that, why are you doing this? Like, they just don't know ever what's going to happen, and there's that fear of some kind of physical punishment or consequence all the time. So loud noises will freak them out. Any kind of someone walking into the room and them not hearing that and being startled, like their startle reaction is so strong. And it's not like anything that I've seen in other kids because of how high it is. So we think, okay, like this is someone that we get some information on that may have been trafficked. Coming into care right away, whether it's residential foster care, you're a therapist going in and you have this backstory, whatever that is, just know that here are some of the things that this kid is going to feel right off the bat. And for some of these, depending upon your line of work, this isn't going to be unfamiliar to you in terms of, well, how do I deal with this? But it's good for us to know, to have an understanding about where this kid is at. So in terms of grief, as odd as it sounds, like the loss of family or friends. So the relationship with their pimp, their boyfriend, is a loss. It's still a loss. Even if they're in a better situation, they're not going to recognize that right away. The person that they were connected to, that they thought eventually at some point was going to turn back into this wonderful person that they first met, that hope is still there. That's their family. The other girls that he had, that she worked with, worked alongside, that's their family. They would look out for each other, they would help each other. That's the family unit. So there's still a grieving process that takes place as a separation from that family unit. Loss of whatever was there, personal belongings. She probably didn't have a lot, but maybe there was something that she brought from her family into this. It could have been jewelry, it could have been a purse, it could have been something that meant something to her, and now she has nothing in some situations. So keep in mind, loss of understanding, like even if she wanted to tell you, here's all of the crazy shit that's happened, like where would she even start? And she doesn't assume that you even get the lifestyle that she came from, because what's ingrained over and over again is no one gets us. No one gets our way of life. No one gets our culture. This is how we live. This is how we do things. This is who you are. No one's going to get you. So that's been ingrained in her, that she's not going to be understood. So that's going to mess with her psychologically when she thinks of, how am I even going to start to explain this? No one's going to get this. All of this stuff happened. Where do I start? Like, how do I even do that? Yeah.
So at Kids First, I really realized that a lot of the kids that have been sex trafficked are just totally intimidated by male staff, and just do not trust really anyone within the system. So we've kind of struggled with that.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have any suggestions on what we could be doing differently than what we've tried at this point?
Sure. Some of the things, like, I am going to go through like here's what you should do and here's what you shouldn't do, and I don't know if what you've done falls in either of those categories, and so some of that might come later. But I would say in terms of the male staff piece, I mean, that's a learned behavior, which is going to take some time to unlearn that not all men are like this. Not all men have this motive or this hidden ulterior motive to hurt you or to want to hurt you or exploit you. I would say one of the things I would recommend, if possible, is to not ever have a situation where it's just, even if it's like in a living room where it's just them and a male staff, to have at least a third person there. and preferably not a male, not have like two men and one woman. But to not leave situations where they feel most vulnerable, which would be in that situation, because that will increase the anxiety and all of that. And so I would say that would be the first thing that I would suggest off the get-go, is to make sure that they are not ever one-on-one, even in an open public space. In a car, if there's just a male driver in them, that's gonna be hard for them. So I would say that. I would also say in situations where if there's other girls in the house and they're able to observe male staff interactions with opposite gender that are positive, which I'm sure happens frequently, making sure that there's someone that's around to observe that they're able to see that, like, the way that they are with her are the way that they are with everyone in that house. Like, they're not targeting her and thinking, oh, like, I'm gonna do this to you. I treat everyone with respect. I ask everyone, like, how was your day? Or what do you think about dinner? Or whatever the question is, that there's that equal sense of we're all being treated the same and I'm not being targeted for purposes for sex, like later or something like that, to make sure that those interactions are very similar and that she's able to observe some of those positive interactions that don't include her, that she can just simply watch and think, oh, like, that's how that happens, and see the interaction from the other girl and think, oh, well, she doesn't seem freaked out, like, she doesn't seem, because more than anything, they're gonna observe as much as possible to try and learn the rules, the what's okay, what's not okay. So as much as you're able to let them kind of see how things play out, that's gonna be the biggest challenger to their thought process. Telling them, I'm not going to hurt you, I'm not going to do this, is good. That doesn't mean anything initially, doesn't mean one thing. And then I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then I know that I'm coming out, like, if you are from residential, I know that I'm coming out to each of the houses during the month of April and kind of doing some more specific, not just with trafficking, but with just some other sexualized behaviors and having some conversations. So I will be able to kind of dive in a little bit more to what is specific to your house or the population of youth that you work with, things like that. So just keep that in mind too, that this will kind of there'll be some follow-up there. The trauma bond, that's a very real thing. One of the worst things you can do with a victim right away is start talking negatively about their pimp or their boyfriend. In the same way that if you had a kid that came into care, you wouldn't want to start just bashing their parents. We all know that the way that kids feel about those important people in their life, regardless of what they've done, even if they want to say those things, that doesn't give you the right to join them in that. And so this would be the same in terms of that relationship. And then lots of fear. Most of it comes from unknown. What are the rules? What do I do now? Because if I spent all night like being raped, then what do I do now? Like, I'm wide awake at night. I'm having trouble sleeping because this is when I'd usually be working. What's this new norm gonna look like? And if it's just me alone with my thoughts, I'm probably gonna have some issues with that because I don't really want to think that. Sexual identity challenged. Like, my identity is what I do, and what I do is sex. So if I can't do that, then who am I? Who am I supposed to be? Who do people want me to be? How can I be normal or fit in? What if my boyfriend finds me and realizes that I talked to you, or finds me and takes me back? Or what if I do get arrested? What if the police just show up? Because I think that I am the one in the wrong here. I chose to do these things, so I could still get in trouble for this. Just that state of being anxious and startled all the time, and then that trust issue, which I know a lot of our kids wrestle with. That's still very much a big issue in this situation. First encounters and interactions, building the trust, it's the same that you would do with other kids. Ensuring safety, that's a big thing, and one of the ways that you're going to do that is by letting them know, number one, what the rules are. In other words, no matter what they do, you're not going to physically punish them. You're not going to hit them. You're not going to withhold basic needs from them. You're not going to do any of those things, no matter what they do. Those things are not going to happen. So what are the consequences for some of those behaviors that they would do? They need to know that up front. As much as you can reduce the unknown and really set up for them what this is going to look like moving forward in this environment, in this place, what the expectations are. That's what they need to know, and they can't just hear that once, right? They're going to have to hear that over and over again, because right alongside that is the other voice saying, no, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this. This is who you are. One-on-one interactions, you're going to find, if they are one-on-one interactions, you're going to want to have that be the same gender. And so, like I was talking about with Dan, you don't want to have a male and a female and not have anyone else in the house. That's extremely intimidating for them. Refrain from using the terms human or sex trafficking and victim. They don't think of themselves as a victim. They don't know what human trafficking is most of the time. They don't know if they've been sexually exploited. Again, in their world right now, they made the choice. If anything, which most of the time they won't say much, but if they say anything, it'll be, no, I was prostituting. I chose to do this. I was a prostitute. That's what you're most likely to hear if you hear anything about what they were doing. Don't expect to get the story about what happened, where they came from, any of that right away. It takes an average of 3 to 5 encounters. I don't really know if that number is accurate. That's what, you know, Manasseh and some other agencies are saying. I just know that, like we know with most of our kids in some situations, especially this situation where they're actually taught to not trust service providers or people that they think are linked with law enforcement or something like that. They're not going to be open and honest with you right away. They're just not, and you have to just be okay with that. Because they're not as likely to talk very much initially, you want to be aware of their reactions, their facial expressions, their body language. That will give you indications as to whether or not they understand what you're saying, how they feel, if they're startled by something, because initially it's not okay for them to feel or care or want anything. So they're not going to say, hey, when that kid slammed this book on the table, that scared me. They're just going to startle and then kind of look away. Like, they, in their mind, don't have the right to say, I feel this. They don't have they're not allowed to do that. So keep that in mind, that they're not going to advocate for themselves in most situations. And then you want to create a safety plan. And it doesn't mean you have to like create something in writing. It just means that you want to go over with them, how can they feel safe? And in their room, are they going to have questions about the window? Can someone get in? How easy could they get in? Are the doors locked? How do people get in here? How do we know who comes in? They're going to want to know who can come and go. What does that look like? How can we keep them safe? And if we're saying you're safe here now, what does that mean? What does it mean to them that they're safe? And maybe your idea of what you think that means and their idea are two different things. So you might need to explain that to them. What does that mean? Or what do you need to feel safe? Or what are you worried about might happen that would make you unsafe here? Asking some of those questions. So just kind of a do and do not, just things that I've learned over the past 7 or 8 years in doing this. I would say things that you do want to do, similar to some of the other kids that we work with, the basic needs need to be met and addressed before the psychological needs. Every time that I go down to the police department or to the Y or wherever to meet a victim, they usually haven't eaten in a long time. They usually don't have any clothes or have like a sheet or something wrapped around them. They're usually incredibly tired. They probably haven't had a shower or anything like that. And so right away, if I was to go in and say, hey, so what happened to you? Like, they're not there at all. They're starving. So usually I will pick up some kind of McDonald's and take that right away. I don't even ask, I just show up and I say, hey, I thought you might be hungry. If you want, this is here for you. And they don't usually eat it right away, but they will within the time that we're together because they really are hungry. Or I might say, hey, like, do you want some clothes instead of like just having this sheet on you, or, you know, something that can be theirs, that they don't have to give back to me, that they can take with them, that they can wear, that they can have, anything that they can equate with feeling safer because they can put something on or hold something. Any of those things are good. Recognizing that, yep, there's a story there and we want to hear that because we want to help them. But where they're at is not in a place where they're ready to tell that. They just want to eat something. They maybe are tired, they need to sleep, they need some clothes, they maybe want a blanket or a stuffed animal or something that they can just hold on to, that gives them a sense of security to kind of help with the process. Again, like I mentioned earlier, you want to explain the rules and consequences. If you do this, then this will happen. That's the world that they come from. Everything is a rule and a consequence. They don't know, like, don't just assume that because they're 13, 14, 15, they obviously know that if they spilled a glass of milk on the floor, you wouldn't hit them. They don't know that, because probably that did happen to them. Any excuse for a pimp to punish someone is when they would take advantage of, because it consistently reminds that person that they can't do anything right and that the pimp is in control. So that kind of abuse and kind of fear was always there. So anything you can do to kind of say, hey, like here's what a day kind of looks like. Like you're gonna get up, like you're gonna take a shower and brush your teeth, and no one's gonna be in the bathroom with you, no one's allowed to be in there with you. If someone comes in, let us know. Like any of those kinds of things, like you really wanna make that clear to them so that they can start to build in their brain what this looks like here and what a new normal kind of looks like. What are your expectations for them? What will happen if they are supposed to get up at 8 o'clock and they get up at 8:05? Because their mind's gonna go right to the worst case scenario, which is some kind of physical abuse or withholding of basic needs. So what can you say or do that will reassure them that those aren't gonna happen? Ask if they have any questions. You can't just say, do you have any questions? Because you've just told them like 500 things, which is completely contradictory to the world that they came from. So what that looks like is, hey, we wake up at 8 o'clock and then we go brush our teeth, we get dressed, we come in for breakfast at 8:15. Do you have any questions about what happens after you wake up? You need to be more specific. Do you have any questions about your time in the bathroom? Like, are other people gonna come in? Do I have to share the toothpaste? I don't know what questions they have, but you have to be more specific. Because when you come from that level of like brainwashing and trauma and things like that, going up and saying, hey, how was your day? Like, I don't even know where to start. There's a million things going on in my head that just happened, so it's easier for me to just say nothing. Which is why when you're asking those questions, that's essentially what it feels like. If you just say, so do you have any questions about any of this? Like a million. But I don't even know how to get there. Like my brain can't break that down enough because of what's going on inside. So you have to be more specific. Assessing their mental state. I know that this is something that will happen anyway, but just know that when you're doing this, you want to have an idea about the person that you're talking to, how present are they with you in that moment. And the reason why this is important is because that's going to tell you how much they've retained in what you just said. If you just went through the rules and you talked to someone that had a flat affect that seemed like they were dissociated the whole time, they're not going to remember that conversation. So then you're going to go, hey, remember when we talked about that? Like, you're not supposed to do this, you're not supposed to do that. No, they don't remember that because they weren't really present. I've had both. I've had someone sit across from me in one situation, immediately just started going into, she had run away from Wedgwood, was gone for 2 days, slept with 17 men, had bruises all over her body, like just head to toe, all scratched up, just had a sheet on. I walked in with the McDonald's, the usual thing that I do, introduced myself, told her that I wasn't with law enforcement, that I wasn't anyone that was gonna arrest her or write anything down about her, that I was simply there to see how she was doing and to make sure that she had what she needed. Immediately, just her whole demeanor, I knew right away, like just completely switched. I knew that she'd checked out at that point, and she just said, very matter of fact, all of the details about what just happened in the last 48 hours. Very matter of fact, just this happened in lots of detail, more than I really, quite frankly, would ever like to know about these kinds of things. And then when she went to grab for the food, I could see the immediate switch again, where she was back and she was just kind of like looking at her, like you can tell, if you work with kids that do this kind of thing, you can tell. And so what I knew is that any information I had given to her, she didn't remember. In addition to that information she had told me about what happened, she didn't remember that she had given me the amount of information she had. So then I have to be careful in the future. I can't just sit down with her and say, hey, so when you told me that you slept with, you know, all these